It says you're live.
Hmm.
Are we live now? Can somebody tell us if we're live? I hope we're live.
This is the thing with internet, man. It sucks.
Yeah, I know, I know, I know. I think we're live. Let's have a look here. We are
Oh,
live.
yeah.
We are live. There we are. We're live. Oh, fantastic. That's good news.
Oh, what is then? It's just my phone. It's really slow then.
It is your
Okay.
phone. Your phone is really slow. So
Yeah.
as I was
Well,
saying, yeah, go on, Eric. Go on. What are
yeah.
you going to
Well,
say?
I got an Android, so I'm not the
Android's a
sharp.
fantastic phone. Don't knock Android. They're amazing. I
Okay.
love an
Yeah.
Android. I love an
All right.
Android.
Well, should we do this for real then?
Yeah, let's do it for real. So it's saying we're going to talk about market recap in April. We're going to go over a few points, but I think there was a few particular questions that you wanted to ask me, which I think to kick us off, and I
Yeah.
think maybe we can continue in that direction.
Yeah. As you said, like April was almost like full on war, let's say, in
Hmm.
the markets. And like it popped up so many news. But one in particularly that I was really interested in was the thing about Trump versus the Fed. Like
Mm.
not just going after euro and the tariffs and everything, but like now he's going after the Fed as well.
Yeah.
So what is happening around there?
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. So the Fed, which is the Federal Reserve of the United States, it's the U.S. central bank, and oh, there you go. Yeah, there's my email telling me that we're
I'll
live.
check.
Um, so the Federal Reserve is the central bank of the United States, and they're supposed to be politically independent. They are politically independent. So that means that if whoever is president, whether it's Trump, whether it's Biden, what they want the Federal Reserve to do in terms of monetary policy doesn't mean anything, or it shouldn't mean anything, right? So if the president of the United States says that he wants interest rates to be cut, then the Federal Reserve doesn't have to listen to them. Now, Trump has been very critical of the Federal Reserve and the Federal Reserve's independence, even before he came into power this time around. He was critical of them the first time around as well. And there have been concerns since before he won the election whether he would keep the Fed independence or whether he would threaten that independence. Some central banks around the world, like the Turkish central bank, for instance, are really not independent, and this means that monetary policy can be used for political tools. So even when interest rates should not be lowered, the president can turn around and tell the Turkish president can turn around and tell the central bank in Turkey lower interest rates, and which causes economic chaos in the longer term. But in the short term, there is a political gain from it. Now, Trump has obviously seen this, and he's thought that maybe he would like to do the same thing. So that's kind of the backdrop to this. Now, Trump has been advocating for lower interest rates for a while, and on as he does on Truth Social and on Twitter, pumping out, screaming at the chairman of the Federal Reserve is a guy called Jay Powell, telling him to lower interest rates. The Federal Reserve do not want to lower interest rates at the moment. They're actually quite scared of lowering interest rates because they think that these tariffs, we can see here, the Liberation Day tariffs in particular, are going to cause inflation in the United States. They're going to keep inflationary pressure. So cutting interest rates in the face of inflationary pressure is just bad news, because you're going to further push inflation higher, and you could end up in an inflationary spiral. So the Federal Reserve is looking at the long-term economic picture, and especially to do with Trump's tariffs, and they're saying, yeah, no, we're not going to lower interest rates for the time being. Trump, on the other hand, is saying, no, I want you to lower interest rates, right? I want the cost of borrowing to become lower for everybody. So you end up with this, they're loggerheads, and they have been for a while. And Jay Powell, to his, in his defense, has been saying that, he doesn't care what Trump says, that the Federal Reserve is independent. And then all of a sudden, let's have a look at the start of April here, because the start of April, on the 2nd of April, we had Trump's Liberation Day, right? Which is when he declared all these tariffs on the world. He got his little board out with all his numbers on them, and he basically just gave an insane speech in the Rose Garden at the White House, and declaring declaring basically trade war on the entire world. So that was on April the 2nd. And then on April the 3rd, he announced additional tariffs on China, Mexico, and Canada. And this scared the hell out of everybody, and we can see that in the DXY here in the dollar. We can see here the second. This is the dollar index. We can see the dollar crashed right immediately on this news. Everybody was very spooked by this. And on April the 9th, the bond market crash began, which is even more important. So this is the US Treasuries, and they are seen as a bellwether for the entire economy. I mean, the amount of money that's poured into US Treasuries is gigantic, and so many countries around the world, including China, who we're going to get to a little bit later, use them as reserves. So I think China has got $3.2 trillion worth of US bonds. And so if the bond market starts crashing, then things get serious. That means that the financial health of the United States is in jeopardy. And do you remember Liz Truss in the United Kingdom?
Yeah.
And she did a similar thing. She made a very silly economic judgment, and the bond market crashed in the UK, and it ended up forcing her resignation. Now Trump isn't going to be forced into resigning, but the markets were spooked enough that he stopped and he turned around and he said, you know what, I'm going to postpone all these tariffs, these Liberation Day tariffs, except for 10% tariffs on everybody. That he was keeping. So that was on April the 9th. On April the 16th, Jay Powell came out and he said in a public statement that he was concerned about the inflationary effect that these tariffs were going to have on the US economy. On April the 17th, Trump took to Truth Social to say that Jay Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. So this is where we stood in the middle of the month. So there's Trump, leader of the free world, saying that this supposedly independent chairman of the Federal Reserve should be fired. And this really spooked the markets, and it spooked them even further when Trump's director of national economic policy, a guy called Kevin Hassett, came out on the 18th saying that the Trump administration was reviewing legal options to remove Powell. Markets, as you might expect, responded very poorly to this. The Dow fell on the 21st of April. The Dow fell by, I think, over 1,000 points. And the dollar, as you can see, hit a 3-year low here on the 21st. The dollar kept on sliding and, continued its slide. And so this is where we stand now. But then Trump quickly realized that on the 22nd that he can't go around saying stuff like this because the markets are going to really freak out when they worry about the independence of the Federal Reserve, because the independence of the Federal Reserve means that the US economy is in safe hands. And as you can see from the market response to anything Trump does, they don't consider him a safe pair of hands for the economy. And by removing this bastion of independence for the American economy, the markets immediately freaked out. They go, no, we don't want you. It's okay, like you can sit there and say crazy stuff in the Rose Garden. We understand you're going to have some control, but the Federal Reserve has to remain independent, is generally what the markets are saying. So, and Trump, rode back and said he had no intention of firing Jay Powell in an effort to calm the markets. We still saw U.S. Treasury yields were elevated even after he made that statement, and markets they felt a little bit better. You can see here, after Trump came out and made the statement, the dollar came back up, and we can see it's now kind of trading in a range. This has been the situation for the last 10 days or so, but then on the 30th of April, just a couple of days ago, Trump started criticizing Jay Powell again, not actually saying he's going to terminate him, but suggesting that he has a better understanding of the markets than Jay Powell does, and that he wants Powell to cut interest rates. So this is where we stand now. Trump is saying he's not going to fire Jay Powell. Do we believe him? I don't know. Do you believe him?
Um, no. Yeah, like I mean, you can't really like trust anything he says, right? And
Yeah,
that's the like ping pong effect of it all.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's the thing, and that's generally been a hallmark of Trump's 100 days is that he says he's going to do something, and markets react, and then he rows back, and he pulls
Yeah,
it back again. So I think where we stand now is in limbo at the moment. I don't think anybody believes that Trump doesn't want to fire Jay Powell. I think the reason why he wouldn't fire Jay Powell is because of the market reaction. So it is possible, it is legal. If if it continues like this, I wouldn't be surprised. But he's only going to do it if the market reaction. He doesn't think the market reaction will be too strong. And I think if I'm in Trump's head, I mean I don't particularly want to be in Trump's head, but if I am in Trump's head, I would say that he is probably he's done so much damage to the markets in the last month that maybe he wants to wait until the tariffs go through and the markets slow down a bit, and the markets calm down a bit, and then I think he'll probably revisit the idea again. So
yeah,
I don't think that ship has sailed. I think Jay Powell's living on borrowed time, but that's my personal opinion, and I'm sure some people disagree with me.
yeah. And I mean, as we see by the polls and everything, the dollar is getting weaker.
Hmm.
Uh, Sometimes slower, sometimes higher.
Hmm.
But like in general, is all this like with the dollar? Is it because the uncertainty of Trump's sort of agenda or behavior, let's say?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question actually, and this is something I wanted to touch on. Um, there's a lot of dollar doom and gloom at the moment, which is the title of this YouTube live stream, and so people like there's two camps here. Some are saying that what we're seeing here with the dollar weakness and with bond yields rising and you know and stock market correction, that what we're seeing here is the end of American exceptionalism. We're seeing international investors pull out of dollarized assets globally. I think there might be something to that. I think a lot of people, because I mean the US Treasuries rely on foreign capital from all over the world to continue buying them, and dollar assets do as well. And with Trump's handling of the economy so far, I think he's really scared markets in a way they haven't been scared for a very long time. Like I said, since COVID at least. And so some analysts are saying that this is a structural shift, that this is
All right.
actually the end of American exceptionalism. That what we're going to see here is a flight from dollar assets, a continued fall in the dollar. We're going to probably see a recession in the United States, and that this is going to be the new normal, and that this will boost other markets around the world. And you can see there is small bits of evidence for that. I mean, we can see that the euro has done really well against the dollar over the course of April. And we know that European stock markets, global stock markets, have had their best month versus the US stock markets in years. So there is definite sign of capital flight from US assets to global assets. Is this going to continue? I mean, it's a hard. I mean, how scared are you of Trump? As an investor, how much damage is he going to do here? And is he going to do irreparable damage? I would argue that damage is irreparable, has already done irreparable damage. A lot of people would disagree with me. This is Edward Yardeni in the FT today saying that the dollar doom is overdone. He's saying what we're actually seeing here is just a correction in overvalued US assets. Everybody's known for years, and especially the last year in 2024, that dollar assets were incredibly overvalued. So what we're seeing here is just a normal market correction that's been exacerbated by tariffs. Um, Other people will say that markets that no, what we're seeing here is a real change in the weather, in the global economic weather. That we're going to see a continued dollar weakness, and we're going to see continued economic weakness in the United States, and we're going to continue investor flight. Um, I think personally, I think a lot depends on what Trump does next.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of investors spooked. I think there was a correction in the markets that was long overdue, and that's what we're seeing here. Um, but that the U.S. economy is still like underlying factors in the U.S. economy are still really strong. I mean, this is the this is the NFP, the non-farm payrolls today. It beat expectations, added 177,000 jobs. We saw the GDP figures come in a couple of days ago, and yeah, they came in. They came in negative, minus 0.3% growth in the United States, but that was due to panic. Well, not panic buying, but most of that loss was from stockpiling, from people who are getting ready for the tariffs. You look at the underlying data in the United States. Consumer spending is still good. Job growth is still strong. So there's a lot still going right in the United States, despite Trump. Now, if Trump continues with his plans to slap tariffs on the rest of the world, especially China, I think he's got them at 145% right now.
Yeah.
Um, I think we're going to see severe damage to the U.S. economy. I don't think anybody with any knowledge of economics would argue with that. Um, so if he continues following through in this kind of haphazard, flip-flopping way that he's been doing with these plans to throw really high tariffs, not just on China, but and you remember there was like countries like Vietnam had like a 90% tariff slapped on them or something crazy. Those islands like in the Outer Hebrides, you know what I mean, that had crazy tariffs. I think Lesotho was being slapped with a 75% tariff. If he continues with these kind of plans, then yes, I think we'll continue to see dollar weakness, and I think we're in serious danger of the United States. Like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Everybody says, or the investors are freaking out because they're worried about the state of the economy, so they leave, and it would just end in a downward spiral. And we'd see increase in value in non-US assets and a continued fall in the dollar and other dollarized assets.
Yeah, and that's the thing also, like because the dollar is weakened, like other assets and other currencies needs to grow, right?
Hmm.
It's all about the euro and stuff like that.
Yep.
So like, can it benefit other currencies that this is happening to the dollar in general?
Yeah. No. I mean, it's a benefit and it's a cost attached as well. But as you can see here, the euro has done very well from this over the last month, and other currencies have as well. So it's not just the euro that's done well, but other currencies around the world. And it's not. And as I said, like I mean, you can expect the European markets of obviously, like I mean, one of the first places that investors go to when they leave the American markets and they pull capital out of American markets is they're going to put it into Euro markets. So the European markets have done very well this month as a result. And again, the more uncertainty that Trump creates in the United States, the more volatility that he provides in the market, the less security that investors have in the United States, the better that not just the euro and the eurozone, but I mean Japan and other big global markets around the world, other markets that are seen as safer, are going to benefit. Um, and again, it all kind of hinges on what Trump does next.
Yeah. And then let's talk about like I wouldn't say the big war in the room, but like the big debate, I guess,
Hmm.
and the thing about Trump versus China, basically. I saw some funny like interviews with the Chinese, I don't know, like politics and stuff like that, politicians. So basically, what is the latest news regarding Trump versus China, I guess?
Right. So the latest news with Trump versus China, it's been interesting because the Chinese have American industry has been crying out since Trump slapped 145% tariffs on China. And then I think China, there was a reciprocal tariff. I think Chinese tariffs on American goods are also super high now, somewhere around the 100% mark. And industry in the United States is saying we can't, this is not sustainable. Basically, we can't, we need, something needs to give. And I think, look, the Trump administration is well aware of this. China's a huge trading partner and is incredibly important for many aspects of the US economy. Um, so what we've seen over the course of this month, and it's been quite amusing actually, is Trump repeatedly saying, "Oh yes, we're making overtures to the Chinese, and we're in talks, and they're responding well." And the Chinese turning around and saying, "No, we're not. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? That's lies. Um, don't lie about this stuff." And they've been and because at the end of the day, the Chinese, they don't want to be able to afford this trade war, but they can, and they're in a much better position to go into a trade war than the United States. They have an autocratic government. They have a centrally run economy. They have 3.2 trillion in US, as I said, US treasuries in reserve. Their economy has performed poorly, especially over the last year and a half. But they're nowhere in. They don't. The industry in China does not need American trade to survive.
Yeah.
Whereas it's arguable that the US, even though it's diversified, is much more reliant on Chinese goods. So there's been this back and forth with the Chinese saying, absolutely not, I don't know what you're talking about, and we don't want to talk to you. And Trump saying, oh yeah, no, there are talks. What's interesting about this back and forth today is the Chinese have actually, today for the first time, have actually made some positive noises. Beijing said it's been evaluating recent overtures. China's Commerce Ministry said the US recently conveyed messages to China through various channels expressing a desire to engage in discussions. China is currently evaluating this. Now that may not sound positive, and it really isn't positive. It's very neutral, right? But at least it means that China is thinking about talking about it. And just that hint that potentially this might not be as bad as everybody thinks was enough to send the S&P up by 1%. We're at that point and I was talking to our colleague Alison, who does the weekly podcast with me about this the other day. We're at that point with the markets where even as long as it's not terrible news, the markets are responding positively, right? It's like, everything might be on fire, but it's not quite as much on fire as it was a few weeks ago. So therefore, that's a good thing. Which is, for me, I mean, that's kind of terrifying, but it's also how markets respond, So, look, as to answer your question, this is where we stand right now with the Chinese tariffs. The Chinese are evaluating. The Chinese don't need the US trade partnership as much as the United States does. Markets in the United States will be pushing really hard for the Trump administration to get a deal done here with the Chinese, so we can start some kind of normal trade flows. The Chinese are going to make it as difficult as possible for the Americans to do that. They are not going to lose face over this. So I wish I could give you more concrete answers here, Erik. But again, we're in a wait and see mode with the tariffs, tariffs in China at the moment. So I mean, overall, I guess the outlook for May and in the medium term is still incredibly volatile. I think Trump has learned from the ructions that we saw in the first few weeks of April to maybe not shake the tree quite as hard. And we can see, because nothing, as I said just before, nothing's actively on fire at the moment. Nothing, Trump isn't firing cannons at anything. And we can see in the last week, markets have calmed down, and we've seen a good market response. And I think this is probably intentional from the Trump administration. They've realized that, okay, maybe we've pushed everything a little bit too fast here. Let's slow down a bit. But I don't think they've stopped. And anybody who does think they've stopped is fooling themselves.
Yeah.
And I expect May to come as we go through May. I think probably the Trump administration is going to start making more moves again in terms of tariffs, in terms of threats to Jay Powell, and through May and through June and through July, and I think we're going to see this is we're in a moment of calm, but I think we're going to see increased volatility again very soon.
Yeah, and also it will be fun to watch the Amazon versus Trump debate also.
Yeah,
See
that was
what
very silly. That was
yeah,
very silly. But you saw Jeff Bezos back down very quickly, and
yeah,
this is the way the American corporations are at the moment. It's very difficult for them to publicly slate Trump to say anything against him, and yeah, creating a climate of fear and which isn't good for the markets either. Which is why I say, I think we're in a wait and see mode. I think we're in a moment of calm, but I do expect volatility to increase again um, through May. Through May. So take a breath while you can. Everybody can take a deep breath and gird your loins and prepare for the next wave.
yeah. Well, that was pretty much it, I guess, from my
Cool.
side anyway.
Nice. Well, Eric, it was great to talk to you. I look forward to doing this again. We're going to come back in May and we're going to talk about how I was completely wrong, and how May was a really quiet month for the markets and nothing really happened.
Well, let's see. And yeah,
Yeah, let's see. Let's see. I don't
yeah,
believe it either. Have a great weekend and thank you all for tuning in, everybody who's listening to this now. And I hope you all have great weekends too. And I'll speak to you at the end of May, Eric.
yeah.